What's up YouTube? We are back at it again today and we have an awesome video for you. In this video we're going to be completing our exhaust for our Subaru swapped 73 Super Beetle. And all we're going to do for our exhaust is basically a 3-inch straight pipe, so this car should sound real rowdy when we're done. So what you see here is all the supplies that we need for our exhaust today, hopefully. So we have a pre-bent piece of 3-inch tubing that kind of has all the usual bends you need, like a 180 and a 45. And then we have a couple V-band clamps that I bought off Amazon. I'll put the link in the description below. And then we also have this turbo flange 2 V-band, which was supposed to be. Unfortunately, this isn't a very good V-band, so let me get a little focus on that. This isn't a very good V-band, so first step will be replacing the V-band that this came with and putting in one that we bought to kind of have a matching set. So that's where we'll start off, and then we will be cutting this down to work to get our exhaust to basically run from the turbo here. We'll have it do a 180, and it will come out around here and hopefully just have like a slash cut going down to the ground. So like I was saying, the first thing we're going to want to do is actually cut this kind of junky flange that came with the eBay turbo flange, or turbo, I guess, exhaust. The reason we need to use this is what I originally had for all of our other mock-ups was a 90 degree, but unfortunately there was no really good way to get that 90. It was going directly down on the axle on the driver's side. So unfortunately there's no real, even if I did pie cuts, it was going to be really close to hitting the axle. This gives me a lot more opportunity to do different bends and different axes to avoid the axle. So yeah, like I said, we're going to cut this crappy V-band flange off and replace it with one of the ones that we bought, which will at least we'll have a matching set then going off of the turbo. So the next thing we're going to want to do is get this all down to one flat surface. I definitely screwed myself a little bit here because I kind of went off the straight line. So it's going to require taking off a good chunk of material, but I think we should still be fine.
Perfect.
So just so you can kind of see, this is what I had for mock-up for the first start, and if you imagine this is headed towards the front of the car, this is where the rear axle was, so it's really difficult even with pie cuts to kind of get around that. And so that's why we're switching to this design that comes straight out, so I'll be able to actually either curve around or curve and go under the axle. I'm going to try to actually just go over and do a U-turn and back out. So what I'll do is I'll take this piece here, and I'm actually thinking if I cut it right where the bend starts, I can take this longer piece and use it to extend out the tailpipe and have this go directly to the V-band to the turbo. So you guys can watch me as I try that now. Alright, so we get that little tacked in piece kind of where we want it. It actually may be in a pretty good place. May require a little more trimming. You can see we're actually hitting a little bit of the body here, so we might trim that out. And we may be close to the axle, but it's kind of hard to tell. It looks like we could be, might not. We're jacked up, but the tires are actually on the ground. So this, I don't know if the suspension's fully relaxed right now, but the axle will go up as weight goes on the car, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. And we are a little close to the shock as well, but I think some heat wrap should be fine to alleviate any issues there. So I think what I'm going to do actually is take the long piece here, and I may be able to just simply run it out and kick it down right here. I can show you once I put the camera back on the tripod. Alright, so we did some measuring, and we're going to need a little more material to actually make a tailpipe that goes all the way out to the back of the car. So in the meantime, I'm going to try to weld up this flange all the way around because we know this isn't changing. So we'll start with that, and then most likely we'll move on to the 180 piece as well. But we may wait till the straight comes in and do this with pie cuts, or we may just do that at a later date just to keep this going without slowing down too much with a bunch of pie cuts. But we'll definitely start with this either way. Alright, so now we'll work on welding the V-band flange to the actual exhaust tubing. So I threw the rear fender on just to start to get a feel for where I want the exhaust to go. And I threw up a poll on Instagram for you guys to kind of give me a feeling if we want to go kind of with what I'm calling like a turn down, where you kind of do more of this hot rod style where it goes down like this versus having it come straight out. So I'm letting you guys vote on that, and basically what the group decides is what we'll go with. But as you can see back here, so we have our turnaround, but it's kind of hard to see from this angle. But it's still just a little closer to the axle than I'd like. So what I'm gonna do is actually cut the bend back only a few inches from where it makes the 180, so that I can hopefully then add a turn to that, and basically being able, by adding the turn, I'll be able to lift the whole exhaust up a little higher away from the axle. So I'll show you that now. It's a little easier to see from here now that I cut it, but I gained maybe an inch or two of clearance by cutting that down, be able to turn it up higher. So now what I'll do is I'll probably start using pie cuts to change the angle to get us to lead back out to where we want it to. So I'm going to do a time lapse now of that, just cutting the pie cuts and starting to get it go in the direction that we want. Alright, so now that we got these kind of rough cut, you can see here I actually already took one of them and kind of cleaned it up using my belt sander. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the other two, and also clean up some of the other pieces that we're going to connect to. so now that we have our pie cut all set, and I think we have enough for what we need, I basically just took a straight piece for the section that I needed. This is roughly how long I need. It might be off by a few inches, or inch plus or minus. And then I have my flexible coupling here, so that'll go on one end. And then we have our tailpipe here, and that essentially will make our exhaust with the 180 that we have on the turbo back. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of mark where this needs to be tacked to the turbo back, and I'll bring that part of the exhaust out and tack it together, and we'll have about 75% of the system tacked together, and then it'll just be the tailpipe, a hanger, and we'll finish weld everything. So we had to add just one more pie cut on here just to get us one last kick up so that we could get the down cut that we wanted for the tailpipe. So now that we have this on, it's pretty much an exact fit. And so we'll cut out about 3 inches afterwards to get this to fit on in the whole mess of everything, so that we have this flex joint before our exhaust hanger. So what I'm going to do now is just do one final test fit, and then I'll cut out the length of our flex coupling here from the straight piece of pipe that we have still attached to the turbo part of the exhaust. And then from there we will, we'll finish up our tacking, and we'll be able to kind of go ahead with our finish weld of the whole system. So after looking at it a little longer and getting my cuts right, I'm actually going to take the flex coupling out altogether and just have it be the straight pipe. So at this point, all I need to do is kind of take my tailpipe section and made it with what I'm calling my turbo back, tack it all together, and just make sure everything fits right on the car. Then we'll add in a hanger, and then just finish weld everything around. So we're getting very close. So here's the exhaust kind of tacked up and installed. You can see it does this curve, couple pie cuts, one more there, and then we kick out to the tailpipe in the back. It looks like I did just undo my tacks for that final tailpipe part and rotate it just a little, because it's not perfectly straight the way I want it, but we're still very close to the final product. The other thing I forgot to mention is somewhere in the straight piece I'll also have to add in my air fuel ratio sensor, so that I can get my AFRs for my tune and just for diagnostics and visibility. And you can see this is kind of where we ended up as far as where the tip is. I actually like everything about it, except it's just slightly, can't really tell, but slightly angled this way as opposed to being straight up and down. So I'll just undo my tacks and straighten that out real quick, and then we should be ready to finish weld all of this. Alright, so we got this tailpipe straightened out, and I'm actually really happy with how this ended up. Again, everything's only tacked together now when we don't have any hangers, but you can see how it's routed. I'll probably actually end up using the exhaust manifold. There's a couple of screw bosses there, and I'll probably bolt the hanger somewhere in that. And then yeah, pretty much all we have left to do is add our oxygen sensor bung, which we'll probably put somewhere on the opposite side on the straight piece. And then the hanger, and then we'll finish weld everything, and we'll be all set. We'll be able to hear this thing purr. Alright, so the next thing we're going to work on is the actual exhaust hanger. So I bought this, I believe, either at Summit or Jegs. I'll put the link in the description. And what it is a stainless steel bracket with the 3-inch ID here, so it goes right against the 3-inch pipe. And what I'll do is I'll make a bracket using this straight piece to make basically a kind of specialized L bracket for what I would need, and I'll mount it to the exhaust header, because that's kind of the best thing for me, the way my motor's mounted and the way that I want the exhaust to be hung. So I'm going to start by tacking that all together, and I'll show you what it looks like once we have it on the car. Alright, so here's a better idea for reference. So there's the two pieces I cut, one attached to the hanger and one attached to the exhaust header. And I just tacked, you see right there, just one tack to get the stainless steel hanger where I want it, which I'm going to have to adjust it because that's not really in a great spot. And then from there we will we'll tack this bracket together, and then we'll finish weld everything, and we'll have our hanger set up. And I like it because it's pretty hidden, you won't really see it from anywhere, so I like that a lot. Alright, so now we have the hanger tacked in place. The next thing that we're going to do is I already marked where I want to put our oxygen sensor. So we'll drill the hole for that and tack that on as well. And then we will clean this all up and back purge it and then do all our finish welds. So I'll show you where, the work for the O2 bung, and then I'll actually show you how we back purge it and do all the finish welds. And then we'll be done with this, and I'm really excited to hear it run. It should be pretty rowdy. Alright, I had to go out and buy a larger step drill because I didn't have one big enough for what I needed. So we're going to see if this gets the job done for drilling this hole for the O2 bung. Alright, so now that we have everything tacked on, we're going to back purge this whole system, and then we're going to do all our finish welds. So what I've done is I've added aluminum foil to both ends and put a plug in our bung hole. And I have a dual regulator on my, as you can see up here. So I have a dual regulator on my TIG bottle. So this one goes to the actual TIG machine, and this one now is plumbed into the pipe, and that will back purge the whole pipe. And this just makes sure that you have shielding gas on the back side. So that's what I'll show you now is the finish welds. So unfortunately, I think the camera died, and I was in a little bit of a rush just to get this in because I'm really excited. But as you can see, here's the final welds. We have the bung now welded in for the O2 sensor, and the O2 sensor is installed. And I can show you where our bracket will go. Right here, you see it's welded in now. You can see some more of the welds right here. I'm actually really happy with how they came out with the back purging. And so now all I have to do is finish the bracket for right here, and we'll be able to start it up and hear how it sounds. And here's the little bracket we made. I just threw some paint on it to make sure it wouldn't rust. So now I'll show you it on the car. And you can see right here is where the bracket is. Right by the rear of our tailpipe. and it's mounted right to the exhaust header. And so I already went ahead and got the intercooler back in place. We got everything ready to go, so the only step left now is to hear it run. Well, that was sure rowdy. I'm not exactly sure why there was so much oil and actual white smoke coming out of the exhaust. So we're gonna have to look into that. But the exhaust does sound pretty good actually. So I'm pretty happy with it. For the time being, we're gonna call the exhaust done. And make sure you keep an eye on this build because all we really have left is to do our oil system, which is really just our air oil separator, and our intake for the turbo, as well as our coolant system, and then we'll be taking this out on its first drive. So as always, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to hit the like button, be sure to subscribe for more content. Hope to see you again soon.